Indiana News Desk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, on the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana News Desk, Governor Mike Braun wasted little time exercising his power over Indiana University's Board of Trustees, replacing the 3 alumni-elected members this week.
The response was overwhelming for folks that wanted to become a trustee at IU, so I think you can read into that.
2 of Braun's picks have national reputations for their conservative views. Advocates of special education in schools worry about meeting student needs with funding cuts at the state and federal levels.
We already start out in a funding deficit model, and if we're going to take more funding away from that, I think we all can do the simple math on that. Around
15% of students in the United States receive special education services. And officials finally broke ground this week on the Bloomington Convention Center expansion. We'll have these stories and more right now on Indiana News Desk.
Hello and welcome to Indiana News Desk. I'm Perry Metz, sitting in for Joe Wren. After nearly a decade of debate and development, the Bloomington Convention Center expansion is finally underway. Local officials had a groundbreaking this week to kick off the project, which is expected to take about 18 months to complete. Our Donnie Burgess was at the event and has this story.
Shovels hit the dirt Tuesday afternoon, putting in motion the long-awaited construction of the 61,000 square foot addition across from the current Bloomington Convention Center. It's a project that civic and community leaders have anticipated for many years.
For far too long, our current facility has limited size and scope of events that we can accommodate. But with this expansion, that all changes. We will now welcome larger conferences, fill hotels during the week, and better support our local economy.
The Convention Center, recently renamed as the Bloomington Convention Center for marketing purposes, was originally built in 1923 as Graham Motor Sales. The building was renovated into a convention center in 1991. Land for an expansion was purchased in 2010. The Monroe County Council passed a food and beverage tax in 2017 that funds the project. The Capital Improvement Board was created in 2023 to manage the project. Despite the progress, some county leaders say work remains unfinished.
Ensuring a successful convention center requires that 2 key issues still need to be addressed. The first being adequate parking for all of the additional visitors, and a new hotel to accommodate large conventions.
Dora Hospitality was selected by the Capital Improvement Board to build the Convention Center Hotel, but Dora wasn't interested in building on property owned by the board. Instead, Dora intends to build at the former Bunger and Robertson site at College Square. That land is owned by the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission. Negotiations hit a few bumps, but the hotel moved forward Monday.
The fact that the Redevelopment Commission last night approved a $300,000 expenditure, which is my understanding is for initial design work for the hotel, shows me that both parties are serious about moving forward, and so we're very happy about that.
The new convention center is scheduled to open January 1st, 2027. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Donnie Burgess.
Project construction is expected to cost just over $50 million. Governor Mike Braun terminated 3 elected Indiana University trustees this week, exercising his new authority from a last-minute change to the state budget. He did so despite recent assurances that he planned to let them serve until their terms ended. And as Ethan Sandweiss reports, Braun replaced them with nationally known conservative voices.
The governor notified trustees they were terminated in a one-sentence letter. Braun said Tuesday they were close to finishing their terms anyway, and lots of candidates had applied to replace them.
With that kind of enthusiasm and the fact that it really didn't make a lot of difference one way or the other, did make the decision to go ahead and do it.
One former trustee, Vivian Winston, was a month away from finishing her term, but Donna Spears and Jill Maurer-Burnett had 1 and 2 years respectively left in their terms. Winston, a frequent critic of the university administration, said in a statement to WFIU that she has deep concerns about the board's inaction after faculty no-confidence votes last year regarding President Pamela Whitten. Quote, "The lack of response to these events, as well as frequent firings for trivial misdeeds, have left a definite culture of fear among faculty and staff." Spears also sent a statement denouncing the matter in which she was fired and calling for alumni to step up engagement with the university. The new trustees include conservative attorney Jim Bopp, who represented Citizens United in a court case that opened the door for corporate political spending. Bopp says he applied for the position but wasn't expecting to start the job until July 1st.
Instead, I get a call from the governor's office and say, "Congratulations, it's effective today, and you have a meeting next week."
He's championed conservative causes throughout his legal career, including opposition to same-sex marriage, attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, and a lawsuit against IU for its COVID vaccine mandate. But Bopp and Braun say he's there to protect free speech on campus.
You want somebody that's going to really be respectful of the First Amendment, and it's making it clear that it ought to be a place where all views are listened to.
Bopp says, as an attorney who works with First Amendment cases, he's concerned about issues that IU has had with free speech, including a report by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression that the university is a top 10 offender for punishing speech.
I'm not prejudging that. I'm just saying it's been raised by people on both sides, all sides of free speech issues, and it just needs to be carefully examined.
Governor Mike Braun has also appointed former ESPN anchor Sage Steele, who was suspended from the network in 2021 after comments against COVID vaccine mandates and about former President Barack Obama's racial identity. Steele gave IU's undergraduate commencement address in 2015. His third appointee is Indianapolis attorney Brian Eagle. A board spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment. Finally, Braun also renewed the membership of board chair Quinn Buckner, despite the fact that the new law prohibits him from serving a fourth term.
It clearly said it's not retroactive, so the fact that he is a new appointee, that's when it starts.
It is not clear in the new law that it does not apply to sitting trustees. The Board of Trustees will meet next Thursday to approve next year's university budget. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
Braun has also called for a tuition freeze over the next 2 years for in-state students at Indiana University. David Reingold began his position as the chancellor of IU Bloomington this week. We sat down with the former Purdue University vice president to talk about his role in the newly created position. Katie Spack has this report.
Reingold spent 18 years at IU, once serving as the Executive Associate Dean of the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. In the newly created role, he will lead the university's flagship campus and work in President Pamela Whitten's cabinet.
We share a number of common goals, and I'm looking forward to working with them to lead the campus to new heights.
The role was created after significant protests and multiple votes of no confidence against Whitten and Provost Rahul Srivastava last year. As Chancellor, Reingold will assume many of Srivastav's former responsibilities. Whitten says the Chancellor will focus on building relationships with faculty and getting in touch with campus needs. Reingold left IU in 2015.
I'm also mindful that during that time passage there are new concerns, new issues, new pressures.
It's only his first week, but Reingold has to contend with a litany of pressures. Budget cuts from the state and federal government, and new laws that could force IU to end or consolidate majors with low enrollment.
Taking a close look on a regular basis is sort of what we should be doing. I think that we're certainly appreciative of the state's interest in higher education.
Reingold says he plans to be transparent, open, and honest. He's touring the campus in the next few months to learn more from the community. With reporting by Ethan Sandweiss for Indiana News Desk, I'm Katie Spack.
Now more headlines from around the state. Indiana State University has eliminated 32 positions due to budget cuts. That includes the Vice President for Student Affairs, the Executive Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and the University Communications Director. It comes after Indiana cut 5% out of its funding for all state higher ed institutions for 25-26. For ISU, which is already trying to recover from a sharp decline in enrollment, that means a reduction of about $3.9 million. Governor Mike Braun says he's open to a discussion about the future of capital punishment in Indiana. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports the cost of purchasing the drug used for lethal injection is a big part of what's prompting the conversation.
Indiana used the last of its stock of a lethal injection drug last month to execute Benjamin Ritchie, and Braun says he's not currently planning to purchase more.
Something that costs, I think, $300,000 a pop that has a 90-day shelf life. I'm not going to be for putting it on the shelf and then letting them expire.
Braun noted that South Carolina expanded its death penalty methods to include firing squad and electrocution.
In the whole question of capital punishment, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on it. There are legislators that wonder if it's still relevant. I'm going to listen to them, the courts, and the broader discussion in general.
There are 6 men currently on death row in Indiana. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
A prisoner at the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute has died just 10 days after arriving at the facility. Employees found 22-year-old Javin Pedro unresponsive last Saturday morning. Life-saving measures were taken before he was pronounced dead by hospital personnel. Pedro had been convicted of selling fentanyl that caused the overdose death of a 15-year-old in Oregon. The Bloomington Police Department has sworn in 11 new officers, its largest class in at least 35 years. That brings the number of officers in the department to 93. BPD is authorized to have 105 officers.
We took several steps in order to really give the officers what they needed to not only to feel safe, but also to make sure that they were fairly compensated.
Some of those steps include take-home vehicles, which have helped with response time. Thompson says wages also have increased. Coming up next on Indiana News Desk.
Millions of students with disabilities receive special education in public schools. I spoke with advocates who say they can't afford to lose federal support for those students.
And a new exhibit on IU's campus tells the story of indigenous people who lived in the city by the river.
These stories and more right here on Indiana News Desk.
This is the moment that you've been waiting for.
On your marks, get set, go!
Discover extraordinary lost worlds.
I know scientists that would give their right arm for this.
This is heaven. Hope y'all ready.
Recently, WFIU and WTIU lost a combined $450,000 in state funding. This loss will directly impact the programming you rely on every day. The mission of public media has never been more vital or more vulnerable than right now. We're deeply committed to providing trusted programming to this region, and we're relying on our community now as much as ever. Help us meet this moment by becoming a sustaining member or increasing your monthly gift at WTIU.org/donate. Thank you.
Welcome back to Indiana News Desk. Nearly 2 million people rely on health coverage provided by Medicaid programs in Indiana. But that coverage may be at risk after state lawmakers, and now Republicans in Congress, look to make significant cuts. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports Hoosiers are caught between state and federal Medicaid policies that could threaten access to care in rural areas.
Indiana's Medicaid overhaul includes policies like establishing work reporting requirements for the Healthy Indiana Plan, or HIP, and increasing eligibility checks for Medicaid members. Both will likely result in people losing coverage. Now, changes being proposed at the federal level are adding even more uncertainty. Leo Cuello is a research professor at Georgetown University Center for Children and Families. He says federal lawmakers are looking to cut Medicaid costs through dozens of policies, including their own version of work reporting requirements for Medicaid expansion programs.
I don't think many people yet understand the impacts. They may not understand it until they lose their health insurance.
The federal changes are tied to hundreds of billions of dollars in proposed spending cuts to Medicaid. Republican lawmakers say they need to reduce federal spending to pay for the Trump administration's tax cuts. But if an estimated 230,000 Hoosiers lose health coverage due to the changes, that would likely create additional problems elsewhere. Foundation's Family Medicine is in Austin, Indiana. About 60% of its patients are Medicaid members. Dr. William Cook serves as its medical director. He says when people lose coverage, they stop seeking preventative care. Cook says hospitals and the state may end up footing the bill for the more expensive emergency room visit or a larger public health emergency, which in rural areas could be enough strain to result in closures.
We're really pushing this budget downstream, and we're going to pay for it in the end. I think it's a little short-sighted.
Teresa Woodard has been a patient of Cook's for years. She says many families in Austin, including her own, rely on Medicaid.
In small rural places like this, it would be traumatic. It would affect so many people that depend on it for their medical care.
Foundation's Family Medicine is the only primary care provider in Austin. If the changes affect the practice, Woodard and many others in the community would have to choose between traveling further for care or not seeking it at all. Medicaid members say they have to live with the life or death consequences, whatever lawmakers decide.
It's something that's going to devastate small areas like this and others.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
One Lawrence County organization gathered last weekend to protest these possible budget cuts to programs Hoosiers say that they rely on. That includes Medicaid, Medicare, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. They demand that Indiana Senators Todd Young and Jim Banks come to Mitchell and meet constituents who will be affected.
This is food off of the table. This is people without care. This is people not going to the doctor when they need to. People are going to die because of this, and people are going to be affected right here in Lawrence County.
Albert says Mitchell is a rural area that already has issues with care and food deserts. He says cuts to these programs will just make basic needs even more inaccessible for the people of rural Indiana. About 15% of children in the United States receive special education services. Millions of these students with disabilities also get federal funding to attend public school. But with cuts to education funding at both the state and federal level, our Aubrey Wright reports that special education advocates are not optimistic about the future.
The Individuals with Disability Education Act was created to support students with disabilities, and that act provides federal funding and enshrines their right to appropriate education. But as the Trump administration pledges cuts to the U.S. Department of Education, schools with tight budgets may struggle to meet legal requirements.
Christy Brown Laughlin says the Autism Society of Indiana wants to make it easier on families.
You know, it's already confusing for a lot of parents when they first get the diagnosis of autism.
About 1 in 36 U.S. children has autism spectrum disorder. After diagnosis, Brown Laughlin says some parents may have no idea what to do next.
Oftentimes the public doesn't understand necessarily about what kind of services are offered to a child with a disability.
The federal government established protections and funding for these students with disabilities through the IDEA. But some believe the act and the rights it guarantees are threatened as the Trump administration reshapes education.
It's going to affect millions of students with disabilities and their families. And I think that's very concerning.
It's been 50 years since Congress passed the IDEA and changed special education in the U.S. It's difficult to imagine education before it was enacted.
Something that we're able to kind of take for granted, and that is students with disabilities included in typical classrooms with everybody else as much as possible. That's not how it always was.
The Act states students with disabilities must have access to free and appropriate public education. NORD says through the Act, young children have a right to early intervention that identifies their disability before starting school. And when they reach the classroom, they have special services to accommodate their disabilities and help them learn. He says these critical services are important for students and for their futures.
Education is a process, and at the end of that process, we're hoping to have citizens that can contribute to society and understand and be independent and be able to be a community member.
Many students with disabilities have individualized education plans, and Brown Laughlin says there's been a big push for inclusion.
If possible, we would like for that student who does have autism to be in a classroom with his non-disabled peers and to be presented the same curriculum.
NORD says the federal government partially funds this required support for students with disabilities, equaling about 13% of special education funds. And he says there's a lot of fear about what comes next if it's lost.
Because federal law states that we can't go back, that students deserve to be there, and not just deserve, but it is their right to be there. So balancing this out, how do we make that happen with fewer resources is a real concern.
Like NORD's special education advocates say Indiana's public schools can't afford any more cuts.
How are special education administrators, teachers, or staff dealing with these shortages already?
Yeah, it is tough.
Quiz says he's seen how schools are already struggling with teacher shortages.
We all want to do everything we can for all of our students, but if there simply are not people to do this work, there are going to be things that don't get done.
He says the federal government actually promised to fund about 40% of mandated services through the IDEA, more than double the current funding rate.
We already start out in a funding deficit model, and if we're going to take more funding away from that, I think we all can do the simple math on that reality.
Quiz says special education budgets are already lean, and public schools will probably not get any more money. It's going to be harder for them to deliver crucial services and to meet minutes required for IEPs. But it will get done. They're making things work. For now.
I have 3 kids. My youngest has an IEP. Fortunately, I work in this area. I've been doing this for 20 years, so I know the ins and outs. So I see what's coming down the tracks.
The Trump administration proposed moving special education programs to the Department of Health and Human Services, which recently fired thousands of workers. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Aubrey Wright.
A new exhibit in Bloomington explores the culture of indigenous tribes who lived in what is now called Angel Mounds in Evansville. Isabella Vesperini has this report.
The Indiana University Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, in collaboration with the Angel Mounds Exhibition Council, will tell stories from the historic site. The exhibit, City on the River, was created through years of research with the descendants of the indigenous community. This group lived at the site by the Ohio River between about 1100 and 1450 AD. They created earthen mounds designed to align with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. The exhibit features items found at the site and used by the community, such as jewelry and tools.
My favorite piece in the exhibit is a small bird-blown flute. I love it because it's just so very delicate. It's amazing that would have survived for so long, but it also shows kind of the ephemeral nature of life through music.
A booth in the exhibition lets visitors listen to 2 Indigenous women share their stories, as well as a virtual reality dome.
If you were unable to go to Evansville for any particular reason, or you haven't seen Angel Mounds, through the virtual reality dome, you'll be able to see Angel Mounds from a bird's eye view. You'll also be able to see how people lived, and you can walk into what a home would look like and see it as if you're standing in the front door.
The goal is to honor the community that lived at the site over 900 years ago and draw parallels between their lives and contemporary life today.
You can watch people, contemporary folks living today playing stickball, and they're playing traditional sports with each other, and see some pieces that were made that were directly connected to historical games as well, and we're still using those pieces within the games that we play today.
The site was named Angel Mounds after the Euro-American Angel family, which owned the land in the early 1900s. The Indiana State Historical Society purchased it in 1938, and it became a National Historic Landmark in 1980.
It is a really important location for a lot of indigenous groups in the Midwest, and it has been very open for descendant communities to visit and to collaborate in regards to ongoing excavation.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana News Desk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. On the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.